Right. Hello, June.
Hey, good morning, Sai. How are you
Good
this morning?
morning.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. Well, it's evening
Yes.
here, but I had a
Yes,
very
no, of
good
course.
day.
Good, good. I'm glad you had a good day. Thank you so much for staying at the end of your day to make this possible. Um,
Oh, no, we're very, very excited to have you on board. And first of all, welcome to Futuristic Parenting Decoded podcast with Codevidhya. We're really, really honored to have someone like you to speak with us on this podcast.
Well, thank you. I am so excited to have learned about what you guys are doing because I've done a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
research since you first
Mm-hmm.
reached out last week about what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and I've listened to some of the podcasts, and
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is really needed in the world, and so it's a real honor and a pleasure for me to be here this morning,
Wow.
today, this
Thank you
evening.
so much, June. That is so nice to listen to. I know you're very busy, so I'll get on with this.
Yeah, for sure.
You sent me your bio,
Yes.
which was quite frankly mind-boggling. Like, your career has been long and fruitful, and
Oh,
I'd like to thank you for all the work that you've been doing for the education industry. Could you please tell
mm,
us a bit about your journey for our listeners? Where did you start, and what are you doing now?
for sure. So, I should take a couple of minutes and just say that my first classroom was when I was opened when I was 7 years old in the laundry room in the basement of my parents' home to my stuffed animals because I realized it just happened that I realized that I was born to teach, and I knew that from a very young age. So. Um, my family used to kind of let me be in my teaching space in the laundry room. And, and my dad actually very kindly installed a wall blackboard and made an endless supply of colored chalk available to me at a young age so that I could carry on my lessons. Um, but fast forward, several years, I was able to enroll in a university program at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, which is a really, Kingston is a fairly, was at that time, it's less so now, a fairly non diverse white city, conservative city. And, um, and I felt like I was a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, in part because I really had always been drawn, again from a very young age, to multicultural, multilinguistic experiences, and so. But the beautiful thing about this program was that it was doing two degrees at the same time. I was doing an undergraduate degree in French, in
Mm-hmm.
linguistics and translation, and at the same time, I was working on an education degree that would allow me
Mm-hmm.
to become licensed as a teacher in Ontario. So, there were some upsides and some downsides to that. Kingston is a very diverse city in terms of class, because there are
Mm-hmm.
seven penitentiaries, prisons located in the city limits. And so
Mm-hmm.
I worked with some kids who were marginalized during my time at university, and it was a real eye opener for me, in terms of realizing that the world, lots of children don't have what they need growing up, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that in some ways gave me increased my passion for equity, increased my passion for just keeping my eyes open about, who we're hearing from in the world, but also what voices are being silenced and what we're not hearing from. Where are we not
Mm-hmm.
hearing from people? Um, and so I continued my career. I started my teaching career once I was qualified. Excuse me, in Kingston, because by that time I had made many connections in the community, and I was known, through my volunteer work and my work with in North Kingston, and it really happened in a very nice way that I was known in the schools. And at that time, it was hard to get a teaching job
Mm-hmm.
um, because the population growth was as it was. I was one of two people hired that year in the Kingston board, and it was an older board. So most of the folks who've been teaching there have been teaching for many years, and so for
Mm-hmm.
several years I was the youngest person on staff. And I
Mm-hmm.
was the teacher who had the loudest class. I was teaching in French at that time, and we were always doing messy projects. And my colleagues very graciously and kindly um, didn't just tolerate that, but were actually curious about, my methods. And my
Mm-hmm.
methods
Mm-hmm.
really were about getting, you know, student engagement
Mm-hmm.
sort of rolling. Didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what age of students, but I wanted students to understand that they have a voice, and that they were part of the curriculum design as much as anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't take me long. I always said that I would teach for a decade and then see where that led me. And
Mm-hmm.
just the way it rolled out, we had a massive curriculum reform in Ontario in 1997. By that time, I
Mm-hmm.
had been teaching for 10 years, and it was really time to take stock and look at where things were going. And the
Mm-hmm.
provincial norms that were being rolled out. When I say norms, I mean standards-based curriculum reform,
Okay.
where
Okay.
in second grade,
Mm-hmm.
children are meant to learn like these 857 discrete specific expectations, and they have to
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate mastery. And so, for the first time
Mm-hmm.
in my 10-year career at that point, I was faced with the fact that effort and all reference to
Hmm.
effort on the report card was taken out of the report card. And the only thing that I
Wow.
was permitted to talk about with parents in a report card situation was, you know, um, a student's actual achievement. Like
Mm-hmm.
potential didn't enter into it. Individual context, individual difference, nothing mattered other than, what I saw on the page or what I saw in the test results in the summative evaluation. And there was something that just really didn't fit Sci for me in that
Mm-hmm.
scenario, because I realized that there is so much going on for children and families that has nothing to do with
Mm-hmm.
school and learning, but everything to do with learning, of course, in
Mm-hmm.
school. So I started just quietly, journaling about that and asking questions. And I realized
Mm-hmm.
that that first of all, I needed to ask my questions in a bigger context. So that was the
Right.
impetus to go back to graduate school. And then I just
Mm-hmm.
fell in love with doing research. So that meant that I was doing a PhD, but my original plan had been to teach for my entire career and possibly become a principal. And I had been invited to kind of get my toes wet on being in a leadership cadre at the board level and stuff. And it really, the way things rolled out, the political climate in Ontario meant that I didn't really feel like school principal was really a big enough sandbox, if you will, for me to play in,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
themes that are rolling out in the world were so much bigger than one school or even one school district. And it was there really that in that crucible of really hard decisions, because we don't it's not like we can go to a website, understandyourlife.com, and just download the blueprint for what we're going to do. And I think my own career is, I hope it can be an inspiration to others to say,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, your questions about your place in the world and what you're doing matter very much. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that as an educator, one of the things that I really talk about with students a lot is this idea of, it is both your right and your responsibility to figure
Mm-hmm.
out, what you need to thrive, to ask for
Mm-hmm.
it, and I will work with you to get what you need from a learning perspective, but also to notice what brings you joy and to make your way in the world, based on this kind of, I guess, this idea that we have a purpose, and the purpose is
Mm-hmm.
kindness, and the purpose is making a
Mm-hmm.
difference. So how are you going to do that in the world? That's what I
Correct.
teach ultimately.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's quite a lot that you do, and I congratulate you on such a illustrious career that you have had. And So you opened an evidence-based bilingual learning practice. Can you
Yes,
explain what that is? What is this evidence-based education? Because I've been hearing a lot about it because I'm in the industry, but there are a lot of
yes.
parents who really do not know what that is. And do you believe that is the future of education?
I do believe, thank you, that's a great question. I do believe it's a future of education, and that's exactly why I opened the clinic 16 years ago, Sai.
Mm-hmm.
We are the only evidence based bilingual clinic, I believe, in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I could be
Wow.
wrong. I know we're the only evidence based clinic in Ontario that addresses English and French concerns.
Mm-hmm.
In Canada, we have two. Well, there are hundreds of Indigenous languages, because because we're on stolen land here, and
Mm-hmm.
as you know, as you may know,
Mm-hmm.
Canada is in the process of really, I hope, trying to understand. The travesty of residential schools and the policies
Mm-hmm.
of cultural and linguistic and actual
That's right.
genocide that have
Mm-hmm.
been enacted on our First Peoples. And but we have this kind of political reality of European settlers, French and English, coming here and
Mm-hmm.
fighting on the plains of Abraham, and so two quote unquote official national languages, and I
Mm-hmm.
speak both of them. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
Anglophone. My parents are Anglophone.
Wow.
I grew up
Wow.
in English, but I have my maternal grandmother grew up in Montreal, and from the age of 5, I was learning French, and I lived in northern communities in Timmins and Sudbury, where I saw and heard as much French as English. So, you know, um, what I saw was that repeatedly children were given, a curriculum was delivered or rolled out in the classroom that really kind of didn't address the learners that were necessarily
Mm-hmm.
in the room. And so reading the room as an educator became an issue for me, because you can't teach for very long
Mm-hmm.
before you notice that some kids are learning what you're teaching and some kids are not.
That's
So
correct. Yeah.
that I because I'm a curious person, I realized very early on that we don't just like open kids heads and like pour the knowledge in. It doesn't work like that. So I started noticing the patterns and realized that there was some evidence that, said that, this kind of learner or these kids
Mm-hmm.
benefited from this sort of a more visual approach, or these kids really needed to do things in order to concretize their learning. And so those
Mm-hmm.
questions were what I think fueled my postgraduate path. So I
Mm-hmm.
moved lock, stock, and barrel to Toronto to do graduate work at the University of Toronto. And really, the rest is history, because I absolutely fell in love with this idea that we can know
Mm-hmm.
in advance a lot more than we think we can, um, about what is going to work in a classroom, right? So I mean, I think there are things that are patently obvious about teaching and learning,
Right.
that if we put 60 or 75 students in a class, in a classroom, that there's going to be fewer opportunities for them to do stuff, and move
Right.
around and like learn stuff by
Right.
doing. And of course,
Mm.
it makes intuitive sense, I think, that the smaller classroom is better. But in that,
Mm.
there are times when mixed ability grouping, so pairing
Mm-hmm.
stronger learners with more skills with
Mm-hmm.
weaker learners with fewer
Mm-hmm.
skills, is going to work better. And in the same way, pairing kids with similar learners of similar skill level is going to work. And it just, it depends on what you're trying to do. It depends
Mm.
on the activity. It depends on the knowledge that's
Mm.
kids are required to learn. So I think, I got hooked very early in my career on this idea that we can kind of predict who's going to do well in certain situations.
Right.
So why
Right.
wouldn't we do that? If we can know that, then why wouldn't we do that? It just makes sense to me. And I guess, I think that I do think that there's a moral impetus, like there's a moral kind of like imperative to notice what's going on. I think as the instructor in the room, whether my students are in grade 1 or in first year university, I have a responsibility to see what's going on, to notice who's learning and who's not, and to ask and use all of my skills, and my curiosity to figure out what's happening for a student. And so, really, my career has been based on that. And
Wow.
ultimately, I saw that it was necessary to do something
Uh-huh.
outside the box, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
this is the soup du jour that was being served up at school. And I thought, you know what?
Right.
I think we know a little bit more. We can do something a little bit more nuanced. Does that make sense?
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. And actually, I think we at Code Vidya also, when we teach coding to children, we're
Yes,
trying to bring what could be the future importance right over now. And I think
absolutely.
what you are also trying to do with evidence based learning is very much similar. But when we try and teach children how to code right from the age of 6 to 16,
Yes,
they are so much more interested and engrossed because you teach them from the root level.
yes.
But what is your take on children learning to code?
I think it's incredibly important. And in fact, I was looking at the course offerings, and I think I need to sign myself up for some classes, myself up, because I,
Yes.
I know only the very preliminary basics of coding. And
Uh-huh.
coding is a language, if I'm correct.
Mm.
Like, it's a way of
Yes,
thinking,
yes, absolutely.
you know, it's a
Yes.
way of thinking. And I
Mm.
think that, like all ways of thinking, it
Mhm.
gives us a more tools in the toolkit, right?
Right. Right.
And it so of course it's helpful. It's coming to the world. I mean, so much of what we do right now, so much of what I do right now, and I think that's not just because I'm an educator, but so much of what we're trying to do right now is solutionize problems. We see stuff
Exactly.
around us that these things aren't working. One of
Yeah.
my students said to me last week. He's in grade 9. One of my students said, Dr. June, like, I understand, one of the things about COVID is there's less pollution in the world, which is good for, they're studying endangered species. And, he said, this is very good for the species on the planet. It's very good for the environment. But he said, how are we going to make it so that, we can produce the goods we need in an
Mm.
environmentally sustainable way? He said, "This is
Mm.
what I don't know." This is just like a metacognitive comment during his lesson while
Mm.
we're trying to read through and kind of
Mm.
understand what's happening with elephants in India and Africa. Okay, that's just like
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
sidebar comment. He says to me, "I've
Mm.
noticed that." Right. So I mean, that what a wonderful observation. Right.
Mm.
How are we going
That's
to do
correct.
this? How are we going to like make sustainable development possible? This young man is 14 years old.
Mhm.
He is looking at the future and saying, okay, so obviously we need to be smart. Well, what are the solutions? And I think coding
Mm.
is one of those
Mhm.
things that if we introduced it, and I think it needs to be part of the regular curriculum. Like, it needs to be. I'm
That's
sorry, I'm just
correct.
going to go out on a limb here, but it's one of
Yeah.
these things that like teaching empathy,
Yes.
it needs to be part of the everyday learning experience of
Absolutely.
students. So and
Absolutely true.
I'll just say that it is starting. The trickle down effect is starting in Ontario for
Mhm.
coding,
Mhm.
but not
Mhm.
enough, and it's late. We're
Mhm.
late to the party, I
Yeah.
think. What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think we have so many students from Canada right now, and
Yes,
there are many students from Ontario. There are many students from Alberta who have signed up with us with from
good, good,
Quebec.
good.
So we've seen a lot of people very interested, and I think every nation right now is actually recognizing coding as a part of the curriculum. So that's very very impressive, and it's also very very exciting for us in the industry to know that many nations are on the same path where we are going.
For sure. But I really think that you guys, in doing this and recognizing this and valorizing it, as a kind of an add on, to an extracurricular activity, you are
Right.
leading. You are
Yes.
leading the thinking on this.
Yes.
And I think that that's really important. We need leaders, right? We
Yes.
need leaders to kind of stand up and look at the bigger picture here, right?
That's correct.
So, yes, countries are getting on board, and we need to be led in this. because
Mm-hmm.
this is different. We are preparing
Yeah.
children right now,
Mm-hmm.
this generation,
Mm-hmm.
for a world that doesn't yet exist. What are they going to need?
Yes.
Right? What are they
Yes.
going to need? They're
Yes.
going to need to learn to code for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. I think you just put it in the most brilliant way right there. And you've had an amazing career, like, filled with so many accolades, and you've been teaching a lot of students. You might
Yes.
have been approached by a lot of parents, right? Discussing problems with the children with regards to education. Could you share
Yes.
with us that one problem everyone shared with you, and how did you ask them
Mm.
to tackle it?
Hmm. So I've never met a parent who did not want the best for their child. It doesn't matter how old they are or what their financial means are, what they do in the world. I've never met a parent. Specifically, I've never met a mom who didn't know her kids. Mothers are their kids' first teachers, arguably. And I think that one of the things that parents come to me most often with is they have this feeling in their gut or this niggling kind of voice that says, I'm concerned that my child isn't learning well or learning enough or learning, like, I'm just concerned that there's something going on. And I've never, any parent who's ever come to me and said that, and they've never been wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so my first advice to parents is always listen to what your inner voice is
Mm-hmm.
saying. If you feel
Mm-hmm.
that there's something amiss, then there's something
Mm-hmm.
amiss. Okay.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
a lot of times parents come to me when their student is maybe around the age of 9 or 10, and they're struggling or they have struggled for a period of time with literacy or numeracy, or their road has been a bit bumpy because of you know, of any variety of factors, family moving, or a teacher that became ill during the year and they had a substitute teacher, or just a bad like a personality conflict with the teacher or whatever. But that they have, many parents are told really right from the beginning that it's going to be okay. Just be patient, that things are going to come together for your child. Don't worry. He'll grow out of it. She'll grow into it. The penny will drop, all of these things. And
Right.
parents, and it's often mothers, not always, but often mothers who come, who call, leave voicemails, send me emails saying, I cannot get this kind of impression, this experience with my child out of my mind, out of my experience, that tells me that there's something going on that I don't understand. Either something with their
Right.
memory, something
Right. Right.
about their way that they're processing information, and I would just really
Mm-hmm.
like to know, is
Mm-hmm.
everything on track for my
Right.
kid? Is everything on track?
Right.
And so at that point, I always say, well, it's very easy to find that out. So for sure, let's do that. Let's figure it out. And
Mm-hmm.
and parents are often surprised to hear that I say, that it is not always necessary. In fact, more often than not necessary to
Mm-hmm.
go down the route of expensive cognitive
Mm-hmm.
testing, where parents
Right.
will end up with an IQ score at the end of it and whatnot. It's
Correct.
Parents are often surprised to hear that it is not necessary, to
Mm.
pay the heavy price tag or to go through that whole kind of experience of having their
Right.
child's intelligence evaluated. It's really not necessary to do that. I mean, sometimes it is necessary, but
Mm-hmm.
and I certainly have many close friends and colleagues who are psychiatrists
Right.
and very, very skilled cognitive
Mm-hmm.
psychologists who do this work. But there are so many data points that a parent can look at to know whether
Mm-hmm.
things are on track for their learner or not.
Right.
And
Right.
there are so many things they can do that a parent can do at home before the
Mm-hmm.
child gets to school, while their child is at school, to ensure that things stay on the right track without spending,
Mm-hmm.
the thousands of dollars necessary to have a cognitive assessment.
Absolutely.
It's just not necessary
Absolutely.
in many cases, most cases. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can tell.
And
In other
with
words, sorry, we can tell whether a child's learning or not, right? And this is, I
yeah.
guess, this is the point that I want, that in my practice, I really try and do, to
Hmm.
put the
Hmm.
power of observation in the hands of the parents
Hmm.
and in the hands of the student
Wow.
themselves, because
Wow.
students know if they're learning or not.
Yeah.
They know even from a very young age. And this is why we see their eyes shine and the light bulb go on, when they're coding or when they're doing art or when they're learning math or whatever it is. We see the light bulb go on, and the pride and the excitement and the motivation that kind of kicks in and gets momentum going for them. It's very exciting to see. So if that's not happening, then that's what we need to look at and figure that out.
Absolutely. Wow. Um, you have such a lovely family, and I'm so happy you shared pictures of everyone. It was so nice to see everything that you shared with me. I would like to
Thank
know,
you.
how was your pandemic experience, and as a parent, how did you handle the situation?
Well, my stepkids are all grown now, so
Uh
and
huh.
thriving on their own. So that's been a strange experience, just
Okay.
because we haven't been able to be together.
Right.
And I have five nieces, and they're
Mm-hmm.
all thriving as well. But they're at post
Mm-hmm.
secondary still, many of them,
Oh,
and some of them are still in elementary school. And I would say that this experience for all of us has taught us the value of connection.
right.
It has taught us the is taught us more about gratitude, and more about the ways to connect that don't involve being in the same room.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Hmm.
my immediate family, we're all in the GTA and in a
Mm-hmm.
greater Toronto area. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so we've done a lot of campfires and
Mm-hmm.
porch visits, and
Mm-hmm.
even even in Christmas and the New Year, which in Canada means snow and cold and ice. We
Yeah.
had a big campfire on Boxing
Uh-huh.
Day last year, where
Mm-hmm.
it's a celebration we have where we were doing social distancing around the fire, and
Right.
no hugs, but eye hugs and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm very happy to say that we're all double vaxxed and all doing well, and all of us and my aging parents are doing well as well, and my partner's
That's
family,
amazing.
we've done the same thing, multiple campfires, and in the backyard, and we just, I would say, we figured out a way to do it. We figured out a way to be together. So in with my extended family, we cooked something and arranged
Mm-hmm.
a meal. Like, everybody was having the celebration meal at their home, and we cooked
Right.
a traditional dish that we always make, and we took it around.
Wow.
We
Uh-huh.
like drove it. We drove all over Toronto, and so they would have something to put in their oven from us.
Wow.
That was something that we
Wow.
always did together. But necessity is the mother of invention, right? You got to think
Yes.
outside the box.
Yes.
You got to be creative. How can we
Yes.
continue to have what we've always had, but just in a
Mm-hmm.
slightly different way? Words
Right.
can't express. We had our first meal together as a family.
Hmm.
Um, in it was my dad's 85th birthday. We had my
Wow.
first meal together in August,
Uh-huh.
around the table. That was very moving. And in my partner's
Wow.
family, we did that at Thanksgiving, and we just looked at
Mm-hmm.
each other with tears in our eyes because we've really missed that, right?
Right.
So I don't know
Right.
how it is for you and your family, but we're well, and we're very happy to be coming to the other side of this.
That's amazing. We've been doing well as well, from since 2021. Since the beginning, we had a second wave, which really hit us hard.
Yes,
But after
I remember
June and
reading about that.
July, yeah, after June and July, it has been really good for us, and we've all been doubly vaxxed, and
Yeah,
India has been doing really well in that department.
good.
So we're doing fine, and we're all very happy that now we can see each other, we can go out, we can meet our friends, and we can meet our families, we can go out on vacations. So
Yeah.
it is a quite a refreshing thing, and you only miss something after you know the value of it. So so now is the
Yes.
time that we have to always connect and keep that, like just like you said. But I want to talk about children majorly, because
Mm,
an year for children or 2 years for children is they have lost an opportunity to make friends, to explore, to
yes.
play outside, to learn a few things.
Yes.
There are still a lot of places in the world where the pandemic is still going on strong and the quarantine is still on. What do you think parents should do to keep that small little joys of life alive in
Mm,
the children, like making friends and exploring? How can
mm.
they do it even during quarantine?
Absolutely. I think it's really important. So in the first year of the first 6 to 9 months of the pandemic, I wrote a weekly blog that's actually on my
Hmm.
website at joyoflearning.ca,
Hmm. Hmm.
that talks about things that parents can be mindful of and things to do. And there's no question that there are several things that are top of mind. So
Mm.
the old adage, put your oxygen mask on yourself before you
Hmm.
put it on someone else. Self-care for parents becomes absolutely top of mind, because there are many parents who are trying to care for kids who are doing online schooling and do their own jobs as well, working from home. And it's exhausting. Actually, exhausting
Hmm.
doesn't even begin. It's relentless. It's
Yeah.
it's excruciating in some moments, because kids have found it really challenging to be online. So our under
Right.
12s, in
Hmm.
Canada are still unvaccinated, of course, because the trials are still going on for making,
Hmm.
for that. Kids, I would say the under 12, all kids have suffered, and they've suffered differently. But
Right.
the little guys, the play dates and the playing with friends and playing on on the climbers and stuff outside to develop hand strength, for writing, printing,
Hmm.
being able to play soccer. So the gross motor development is, hard. So self care for parents is at the top of the list. Connection is at the top of the list. Figuring out
Hmm.
how to connect with friends. Many parents that I know and family members I know decided from the beginning of, when this looked
Hmm.
like it was going to be a long time, to
Right.
bubble in a social way with one other family who had children around the same age, and so that they could be safe and they could play together,
Hmm.
so they could continue to have those social connections. I think that that's been a lifesaver for many families. um,
Yeah.
I also think that finding imaginative, creative ways to get together as with families, doing online
Hmm.
activities that aren't about school is really important. So in my family, for example, we've been doing family Zoom nights with
Yeah.
game show using different platforms. Kahoot is one I
Right.
really like, just to
Hmm.
kind of get and have game show music. And I mean, I'm a camp program director from way back. So,
Right.
however, dressing up in costumes and having, cheesy game show, musics and a microphone in hand and, stuff like that, to make it fun and make it silly, and
Right.
to
Yeah.
really, really prioritize, like,
Hmm.
how are you doing in this
Hmm.
moment, rather than, what are you doing, but how are you doing? And then what do you
Correct.
feel like you need? And so one of my
Mm.
students, who's in grade 11, talked about,
Mm.
last week, talked about how, one of the things that she did with her friends through the pandemic,
Mm.
um, wearing masks and such, when they were on online schooling, they would take 5 or 6 hours and go on a hike, and they walked like
Hmm.
15 kilometers all along the waterfront in Toronto. And she said, we'd never done that before, not because we didn't want to, but because we didn't have time
Mm.
to. There were no
Mm.
extracurriculars on, no hockey,
Hmm.
no
Hmm.
lacrosse, no, sports team practices or whatever. She said, so we packed our lunch, couple of bottles of
Hmm.
water in a backpack, and we just left home for 6 hours. And she said we just kept texting our parents to let them know that we were okay. But just,
Okay.
I would say, again, necessity is a mother of invention. You ask your kids what they need, you ask yourself
Yeah.
what you need, and you do that, right? So
Hmm.
for myself, I learned how to bake bread. you know, right? And yeah, I don't know how it
Wow.
was for you, Sai, but like there were times in my city where it wasn't possible to get yeast to make bread. Like we
Oh,
had massive
yeah.
shortages of things, right? Because so
Mm-hmm.
there was no yeast to be had anywhere. But I got some yeast. I got some yeast from a friend, and I learned how to make bread. So yes, it's very
Wow.
hard. There's no question it's very hard. We have no desire to turn back the clock and go back there, but I think as we start to lift in Ontario anyway. The premier announced on Friday that as of Monday this week, as of yesterday, that we were
Mm-hmm.
moving to some new lessened restrictions, which is extremely
Okay.
helpful. We feel like
That's
we're
great.
getting parts of our life back. It feels like
Yeah.
a different kind of normal.
Absolutely.
But we're still masking everywhere and no
Uh-huh.
indoor gatherings of people of more than 25. So, we've really
That's
put
good.
the push on keeping
Yeah.
people safe, which we all need. We need, right? So,
We absolutely need. We absolutely need. And I think you're absolutely right. And talking about the pandemic, I also want to talk about the online classes, right?
right.
You are a PhD holder in
Yes.
curriculum studies and teacher development. Now that most of the world has gone online, what do you think about online teaching? Because you have such illustrious career, but did you ever think that you would be teaching sitting in front of a computer?
hmm So, no, but also yes. I've always taught
Okay.
online. Um, uh,
Oh.
so I always taught a portion of my clients online, really right from
Hmm.
the beginning of my doctoral studies program, which I began
Hmm.
in 2008. I was working in a variety of research projects for the Ministry of Education,
Hmm.
and that required me to do online conversations and interviews with teachers from across the
Hmm.
province where it was just too
Hmm.
far. So
Right.
I learned, a long, long time ago that it is very possible to have a valid research experience. And then when I opened the practice
Hmm.
in 2006, it
Hmm.
was people found me by word of mouth, and kids lived too
Wow.
far away to come to me on a regular
Right.
basis. So,
Right.
at several points, I've had students in PEI, I've had students in Montreal, so very far away.
Uh-huh.
So I would just
Uh-huh.
plan it so that once a year I would get on a plane and go and see them and make that personal connection.
Yeah.
So I think I was really fortunate in understanding from the
Hmm.
very beginning that
Hmm.
what you can do online is really limited only by your imagination. I also had
That's
an
correct.
incredible mentor in that. My PhD supervisor, Dr. Antoinette Gagné at the University of Toronto,
Hmm.
and I was part of her thesis writing group for a number of years. And my
Hmm.
colleagues were doing research all over the world. So
Wow.
people would dial in from South America, from Asia, from
Mm.
Sri Lanka, from, like from
Mm.
literally all places on the globe. And we
Hmm.
would, deal with, internet outages and slow internet everywhere. But so we could talk about our research, and those meetings would
Mm.
happen monthly. And when you
Hmm.
were in her supervisory group, you were expected to join in from wherever you were. And either
Hmm.
it was a hybrid group. So if you were in Toronto and you wanted to join live, you could. And if you
Hmm.
wanted to join from home, you could, wherever that was, wherever home
Hmm.
was. And I think I learned, because of Antoinette's troubleshooting with technology, I learned that if you're patient and if you're creative and if you
Hmm.
let the technology do its best for you,
Hmm.
anything is
Hmm.
possible. Anything
Right.
is possible.
Right.
There are some things that work better. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
I'll be honest. So, for
Yeah.
example, when I'm doing a writing group, like a writing lesson with someone, it's often I need to have two cameras, one
Mm.
camera on the child and another camera on what they're writing. Okay, but that's
Right.
totally fixable. And I have in my
Yeah.
studio here, I have a large screen behind me, so I can do a split screen stuff. And again,
Hmm.
technology is brilliant, and we can make it work.
Right. Right. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, before we end this, I just want to ask you if you could share three or few tips to the parents right now and how they can handle the situation better.
Mm. I think the first, so I'm a big believer in metacognition, being aware of what's going on, right? Sorry about that. Didn't turn my notifications off. Being aware of what's going on. I think that we can
Hmm.
do anything when
Hmm.
we know what we're dealing with. So wherever
Right.
this finds you, wherever you're listening to this podcast and you're hearing me say this, wherever the pandemic finds you, wherever this finds you in your own learning journey or in your child's learning journey, wherever this finds you, uh, take stock of that, take notice. You'll see on my website, if you have concerns, please reach out. Find writers, blog writers, find podcasts like Codevidhya. Yes,
Code
yes,
Vidya.
Vidya,
Yeah.
Codevidhya, to listen to and to be inspired, to find hope, and optimism. We are turning the corner on this, and the world is going to be, I believe, and I hope, and I'm working with everything in me to make sure that the world is coming out of this
Mm.
in a more equitable, more whole, more sustainable way. And I'm looking for
Right.
people to join me,
Yeah.
in wanting that for the planet. The fact that
Hmm.
you and I are speaking today, across time zones, is proof
Right.
that
Mm.
we are doing things differently. And I look forward to an ongoing dialogue with Codevidhya
Yes. Yes.
to see how, because there's an like a Venn diagram. There's a concentric
Hmm.
circles that are overlapping here between what you all are doing,
Absolutely.
what I'm doing. Absolutely,
Absolutely.
And if the pandemic, if I can come out of the pandemic being aware of what's out there in the world and being able to work with international partners, of course.
Hmm.
So I want to do that.
Yeah.
We can do anything
Absolutely.
when we think about
June,
it.
thank you so much
I
for sharing your lovely insights. It
Thank
was
you.
lovely, lovely speaking with you. I learned so much just by reading your bio. I learned so many things about you and a
Well,
lot of
thank
things
you.
that I did not know. So many things can be done. So
Yeah,
you have certainly inspired. And thank you so much for speaking with us again.
it is an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, June. And I will
Bye for
stop
now.
the recording.